Okay, so are you ready to dive into something pretty interesting?
Always. Hit me.
Today we're looking at the 2024 Pornhub Year in Review.
Ooh.
Okay, now before you think we've totally gone off the rails here,
Yeah.
just hear me out.
Okay.
Because this data
Mm-hmm.
is actually super fascinating.
I believe it.
It tells us a lot about how people are consuming content online,
Right.
especially men and women.
Interesting.
And it gives us some pretty unexpected insights into like broader societal trends.
Yeah, I think this kind of data is often overlooked,
I agree.
but it can be really valuable
Yeah.
for understanding how attitudes and behaviors are changing,
Absolutely.
particularly about things that people don't always talk about openly.
For sure. For
Or
sure.
sexuality, exactly.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm curious to see what we find.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So today we're diving into something a little, let's say, stimulating.
Interesting choice of words.
Well, you'll see why. We're going to be looking at Pornhub's Year in Review data for 2024.
Ah, okay, I'm intrigued.
Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea,
Yeah.
this isn't just about, the mechanics of what people are watching.
Sure, I get it.
It's more about what this data tells us about like evolving tastes,
Mm-hmm.
cultural influences, societal changes, that kind of thing.
So like a cultural barometer of sorts.
Exactly. And let me tell you, there's some pretty fascinating stuff in here. Like, did you know MILF is trending up for both men and women?
Ah, really? That is interesting.
Or how about this? Anal is hitting equal popularity among men and women for the first time ever.
Wow, okay. That's definitely noteworthy.
And get this. Overall female viewership has grown a whopping 58% over the past decade.
58%, that's a massive jump.
Right. So clearly there's a story here, and we're going to try to unpack it. Sound good?
Absolutely, let's dive in.
Awesome. So maybe a good place to start is with what men and women seem to have in common, at least according to this data.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Common ground.
And, well, it looks like both men and women are really into Japanese content this year.
Japanese content.
Yep. And remember how I mentioned MILF is trending up for both genders?
Yeah, I do. What about it?
Well, I can't help but wonder, is this reflecting what we're seeing in media overall?
You mean like, are older women getting more representation?
Yeah. And is that representation, maybe shifting to be a bit more,
More race-gay.
well, yeah, something like that.
It's an interesting connection for sure. Like, we've definitely seen a push for more diverse and inclusive representation in media, right?
Slightly.
So maybe this trend in Pornhub's data is kind of a reflection of that.
It's like a feedback loop.
Right. And we also can't forget the ever-growing global popularity of Japanese culture in general.
True. Anime, manga, music, fashion, it's everywhere.
Exactly. So all of that could be playing a role here, too. It all kind of feeds into each other.
Absolutely. Okay, so speaking of shifts, let's talk about this whole anal thing. Like I said, it's reached equal popularity among men and women for the first time. Pretty significant, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder, Are we becoming more open to different sexual practices?
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, just look at the way we talk about sex in mainstream culture now. It's definitely changed.
More frank, less taboo.
Exactly. So maybe this data is just reflecting that growing openness.
It makes sense. Now, for men, the top categories were actually pretty consistent with previous years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So no big surprises there.
Not really. But Asian and French did see a bit of a jump.
French, huh? Now that's interesting.
I know, right? And I have to ask, could the Paris Olympics have anything to do with that?
Ooh, like all those athletes in those tight uniforms.
Exactly. Maybe it planted a few ideas in people's heads.
Well, it's possible. Maybe the Olympics played a small part. But I think we also have to consider other factors, like general media representation, what's considered trendy at any given moment, all that.
True. I guess one event, even one as massive as the Olympics, probably wouldn't shift the data that much on its own.
Probably not.
Okay, fair enough. So let's move on to what the ladies were searching for, and things get a little more dynamic here.
Oh, how so?
Well, ebony actually went down in popularity this year,
Interesting.
while Brazilian and bisexual male saw an increase.
Now that is intriguing. What do you think's driving those specific changes?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, but could it be the rise of Brazilian models and influencers?
Maybe. Or a growing interest in exploring different sexualities. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely makes you think.
Right. Like, it really highlights how fluid preferences can be.
Totally. And how much those preferences might be influenced by, well, everything around us.
Yeah.
What we see in the media, on social media, even just in our everyday lives.
It's all connected. And speaking of connections, here's one that I found really fascinating. The data actually shows a pretty big geographic divide when it comes to female viewership.
Oh, what kind of divide?
Well, the Philippines, Argentina, and Colombia, they all show much higher female viewership compared to, say, Europe and North America.
Wow, really? That's a pretty stark contrast.
Right. So why do you think that is?
Honestly, that's a great question, but it does suggest that cultural norms and societal attitudes towards female sexuality could be playing a huge role.
How so?
Well, think about it. Some cultures might be more accepting of women exploring their sexuality, while others might still have a lot of stigma attached to it.
That makes sense.
Right, and that could definitely impact how comfortable women feel accessing and engaging with this kind of content.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got shifting tastes, geographic divides, and then there's that, well, elephant in the room. That massive 58% increase in female viewership over the past decade. I mean, what do you make of that?
It's definitely the big question, isn't it?
It is. Is it just about easier access thanks to technology, or is it part of a larger story about female sexuality becoming less taboo?
Honestly, I think it's probably a bit of both. Like, there's no denying that the internet has made things more accessible.
For sure.
But at the same time, I do think there's a cultural shift happening, too. Women are becoming more vocal about their desires, and there's definitely less shame associated with, exploring their sexuality.
I agree.
So, yeah, maybe this data is just another indication of that.
It's certainly a lot to consider. Yeah. So as we wrap up here, I think it's safe to say we've uncovered some pretty interesting insights today. We've seen shared interests, evolving tastes, some surprising geographic differences, and of course, that huge surge in female viewership. It really paints a picture of a culture that's, well, in flux.
It definitely does.
So here's a final thought for everyone listening. Given all these trends, what do you think the Pornhub Year in Review will look like in another 10 years? Will we see even more diversification, even greater female engagement, or maybe something totally unexpected that we haven't even considered yet? It's definitely something to think about.
It is. And I, for one, am very curious to see what the future holds.
Me too. Me too. All right, that's going to do it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See you then.